welcome back to Switch to Linux, and today on our DistroWars, we're going to have a look at Linux Lite versus Debian XFCE. This is one of the earlier ones that was up on my list, and I never covered it for some reason, and I was experimenting with a few things. I had a Debian XFCE on my VirtualBox, so I said, hey, let's just run with it. Why not? So our two contenders today, Linux Lite. Now, Linux Lite is based on Ubuntu, and it is really geared towards and tries to market itself as a very excellent replacement for Windows. So really that is their target. You can see if looking at their website, they have a lot of information about Windows, comparing it to Windows. They're talking about the Microsoft Office compatible Office suite with Linux Lite. They're talking about the low memory requirements, so it's good as a gaming platform, good for home, good for work. So that's kind of what they're doing. They have a lot of information on their website. They have a lot of support, a lot of help. You can buy installation media. So if downloading installation media is not your forte, you can actually go ahead and buy it as well. Or if you head on over here to download, we also have information on the repos and other things like that. Very nice, easy to navigate website, and you're going to appreciate the easy to navigate website after we have a look at Debian. So over here, they have our basic information, preferred system requirements, so minimum and preferred. So 1 gigahertz processor. Man, my old original computer wouldn't run it with my 100 amazing megahertz. 768 megabytes of RAM, 8 gigs of storage with a 1024 by 768 resolution. Preferred is a little bit higher than that, but you can go ahead and see that information. You can support them over on Patreon if you like. They do have EFI and Secure Boot enabled, which is pretty sweet. So you have those as options there as well. You can go ahead and download it. They only have the 64-bit version, so if you are running a 32-bit machine, it's not going to suffice it for you. But you can come on over here. Very simple. They have a single file to download, and that's all there is to it. Now, when we land on Debian, we have a holy hot mess. We have just a lot of basic information on on where to get it. We have net installers, ISO images, CD vendors. We have pre-installed items. Just a lot of things. If you hunt around enough, you can even find versions of Debian that have the non-free repositories already configured for you. If you're just wanting to jump on a Debian going pretty quick, most of us that use Debian, this is what I do. Here is your network installer over here. I like the net installer because it's a very small download. It allows you to set up your Debian just the way you want. Now, the downside is you're going to be working through terminal stuff, and if that kind of scares you a little bit, you can actually grab your live install images. And if you grab your live install images, pick your architecture here, and if you go ahead and do that, you can start with any one of the desktop environments we have. So I actually installed this with the net installer, but if you are looking to play around with the Debian XFCE, you want to head on over to the download button there for the live keys, and then you want to just download your XFCE, or if you want, you can grab, I think the standard gets you a GNOME build, I think. We have Mate, LXQT, we have a KDE, we do have a GNOME up here as well. So I forget what's in the standard, and we have a Cinnamon. There are more desktops available to install. Some of them are installable on the net installer, and some of them are available in the repos. You just got to follow the instructions in order to download those. Now, there are some advantages, there are some disadvantages to using each one of these systems. We're going to go ahead and boot up our first contender, which is going to be Linux Lite, and we will go ahead and start with there. And here we are on the Linux Lite desktop. You can very clearly see that they are catered towards helping the new users. We have a nice list of blue items down here. You want to start with installing updates. You have a driver install tool that's going to enable you to just basically update all your drivers, set a restore point in case something goes goofy in your system. Note that the restore point does not save any of your files. It just saves the system configuration. We have language support should language not be your primary language. And then you can select a light or a dark theme. Overall, we find that the theming in Linux Lite is actually very nice, very clean, very attractive. I have no problems with it. We're just going to go ahead and keep it the way it is. Now, before we get started too much further here, we're going to go ahead. Hopefully HTOP is installed, which it is. So we can see that Linux Lite is using 565 megabytes of RAM, which is actually pretty light for a modern system. So overall, not a bad system. Let's go ahead and close that guy out. Now, as far as your system administration, we do actually have a lot of things in here, such as software managers and update things. So here's basically if there's any updates, you're going to get a prompt down here in the corner that indicates that there are going to be some updates. I ran all the updates on both these systems, so we don't have to worry about any of those. But you will get a notification if there is any updates to do. We also do have some software managers. We do have a package manager. This one, I believe, is going to be, which one's this one? I think this one might be Synaptic. There's a couple package managers that we have. Okay, so this one is the Synaptic package manager, which is going to pretty much give you anything that you might need to install. The downside is it's not particularly newbie friendly, but it's actually not difficult to use. Just come in here if you're searching for something, like if you're searching for like Firefox, which should already be installed. You can see the listing is over there. Maybe if we want to do something like Chromium, you can click in on that. You can see we already have some Chromium codecs installed, but over here we can go ahead and click this guy here. You can see it tells us that part of the controversy, the Chromium browser is actually a transitional package that is actually going to the Snap version of the browser instead. That is part of what causes a little bit of the controversy around snaps, which I'm not going to get into in this video at all. All right. But if you're looking for anything else that you might want to install, you can just go ahead and search for it. The downside, of course, is you're not going to be able to hunt around looking for something cool to install. You kind of have to know what you're looking for, and that's kind of the downside of this. Now, to alleviate that, Linux Lite actually has its own Lite software center here, and the Lite software center has pretty much just the most common packages, which is good. And it's a little clunky. You can see it's not as user-friendly as some of the other ones are, like in Linux Mint or Ubuntu or several other distros. But it still gets you here. You can follow the simple steps, and then here you're kind of seeing what they are. So you can see here's your categories. We can see the name is. We can see a little bit of an icon. So if you're looking for something by its icon, you have a description, and then it's going to tell you if it's installed or not installed. Everything here should be there. Oh, look at that. We have some important updates just popped up on our screen. Those must have just rolled out today because I checked updates this afternoon. So we do have the ability on this system to install Chrome, should you want to use Chrome or Dropbox. Here's Etcher is oftentimes used. We have things like Kodi, so if you want to turn your computer into like a media center. Here's OBS, which I'm using here on Linux to record this video. We have Play on Linux, which will allow you to run several Windows-based applications. Just a lot of tools here, Skype, Spotify, Steam, Telegram. So you can see we have a lot of things in here that are more common, but you can see there's not a boatload of stuff in here, just your most common features. Everything else you're going to have to install through the other means. So we'll go ahead and quit. Let's go ahead and check the Linux kernel. We should have a much better kernel on this one, a much newer one. So our Linux kernel here is 5.4 is the Linux kernel that we are using. And overall, the management in Linux Lite is going to be much better than you're going to get inside of Debian. We do have some Lite tools down here. So if you go into your settings, you have a lot of basic information, Lite desktop, Lite sources, Lite software, Lite welcome screen. So these are, and the tweaks is an excellent tool down here where if you have something wrong with your boot, if you have too much memory and cache or whatever, you can do that. You can adjust your computer's host name, display your disk usage. A lot of these type of things that you usually would have to do these in the terminal to change these around are all right here. So it's actually very nice to see that type of stuff. So overall, though, what we're getting is the system is very easy to install. It uses the basic Ubuntu installer, which means you can install third-party media codecs on the installation step, which is something we do not get in Debian. And it is very simple, very easy to install, and then you just land right on a system here, which is extremely well themed, very user-friendly, has a lot of nice tools, and again, we can do a lot of different, we have light themes, we have dark themes. Let's go ahead and go to the dark theme for a little bit, just have a look at what that looks like. Here's our basic desktop preferences. So we can turn on or turn off icons over on the desktop. We can change our wallpapers. They give us mostly Linux Lite wallpapers with just a few other odds and ends. Like, that's gorgeous. Look at that. Very nice wallpapers we have here. Ooh, who wants to be right there right now? Anybody want to be right there? All right. So you can see we have just a lot of different wallpapers to choose from, and a few different light and darker Linux Lite wallpapers as well. So we'll go ahead and stick on that one for now. Go back to our all settings. Everything else is going to be pretty much similar. We do actually have a driver utility here. So no, it's not right there. I thought it was going to be right in this system setting here. If you can't find it again, you can actually boot up your Lite Welcome again, and here's your driver install. So this guy here, this is the one I was looking for. Usually it's going to be in your settings panel. Okay, they put it in the software and update on this one. So it's searching for additional drivers. This case, you can see it's like, hey, you have a virtual machine. You're using one of those. And you can continue to use whatever we're using, which I'm not going to change any of that right now. So that is what we have in Linux Lite. Overall, very easy to use, very easy to install, extremely user-friendly. Codecs are an easy install on the front end as you're installing it. And you're going to land on a very modern, very up-to-date system, brand new kernel, a lot of modern software versions. Let's go and have a quick look at the software that they are giving us. So we have an archive manager backup. So the other one was just system restore point, which is the system itself. This is actually your personal files, but not your system. We have a calculator, file search, font viewers. We have under graphics, we have GIMP, a document scanner, a Paint, a photo manager. We have Thunderbird, managing network connections, online support, Firefox. We have a CD burner, VLC, and volume. And then we have just the three most common options inside of LibreOffice here. Let's go ahead and have a look at what version of LibreOffice we are running. Chances are if you need a newer version of LibreOffice, you are going to want to go with Linux Lite, although it's actually fairly simple to install LibreOffice on Debian as well. So let's head on over here. So we're running 6.4, which is pretty close to practically the newest version. All right, so let's go ahead and take a pause here, and we'll go back on over to Debian desktop and see what that looks like. All right, so here we are on Debian. So the first thing that we note is that the system looks old. I mean, 1990s called and wanted their UI back. But themes and stuff are easy to change. You can download icon packs, you can download themes, you can change CSS files. You can really make this whatever you want it to be. So how old it looks actually does not really bother me. Let's go ahead and have a look at our system resources. So we're running 353 megabytes of RAM, so about 200 less than we were running over on Linux Lite. So definitely a nicer system. Now, one of the things when we are using Debian is our basic user by default is not actually added to the sudo group. So if you're used to an Ubuntu-based distribution, you can do sudo apt install and, for example, htop, although I already installed it. This works on pretty much any system, but Debian by default, as a security precaution, it actually does not have your basic user inside of the sudo report. So what this basically means is that if you do want to install something, generally you just do your su, and that's going to drop you into a root prompt. So you have to be much more careful here, because everything I do in this root prompt here now is going to be run as root, and that could be problematic. But it is actually a security measure that Debian does that most other distros don't necessarily do. All right, so let's go ahead and close down the terminal. The next thing is out of the box. Again, all the out of the box stuff is fairly easy to change, but by default, we have really the old school menu. We're talking wicked old school menu. There's no search bar, but it is very minimalistic. So some people who are minimalistic might really like this. If we look at our applications, very similar application list as we had on Linux Lite. Not a lot different. We do actually have our full suite of LibreOffice rather than just the most commonly used, the writer, the spreadsheet, and the presentations. Although if we boot one of these guys up, we'll actually see that it is a much older version. We were running a fairly new 6.4 over on Linux Lite. This guy here is actually 6.1. Also, I'm noticing here that everything on our UI here is much larger. So I'm wondering if there's some increased scaling or something going on that I might want to fix. Everything, the toolbar is like twice the size that I think it should be. And it's like everything is scaled up. So we are going to want to change some of that stuff. Now, this is almost painting it like it's like Debian is a much crappier system. It's not. It has its advantages. I want to go ahead and look at, I want to switch over to DuckDuckGo rather than Google, because what I want to do here is if you wanted to do something like install multimedia codecs, which are not installed on Debian by default, whereas you have the option to choose them on Linux Lite. They do that because multimedia codecs do have to, need to make sure that you are following the law. Now, what we're looking for is if pretty much the documentation in Debian is very good. Let me do multimedia codecs. If we do this, then we'll see if we can get to the page we want. Now, what we see here is that the wiki at Debian is actually very, very robust. They have a lot of things about how to run your packages. So if I wanted to actually install all of these extra codecs, now there are some codecs by default, but they really only do some basic things. If you need the expanded version, you just need to install the libav codecs extra package from the terminal. So you install this and you're going to be good to go with all of your codecs. Let's go ahead and look at how we install software on Debian. So down here, we only have a single software installer. So if you're not going to be installing things from the terminal, you have Synaptic Package Manager. You can install other package managers as well, but this is the one that we are getting by default. Again, let's just go ahead and look at for codec. And remember that was libav codecs -extra. So we'll come down here and you can see that we actually have some codecs installed, the libav codecs, but we don't have the extras. We need extra. Now, when I go to mark this for installation, it's actually going to also add the libav codec 58, and it's going to remove the old codecs, so there's no conflicts. Go ahead and hit our apply button, and a few things are going to be added, a few things are going to be taken out, and then we are going to be good to go. And so there is how we can add codecs to it. Again, way more complicated than Linux Lite. So all these things here, it's like you're looking at this going, why would I even want to run Debian? Again, our Linux kernel 4.19 compared to Linux Lite at 5.4. Some people might want the newer one. Some people might want the older one. So in a very brief summary, and we're going to wrap up why you'd want to run Debian in our summary here. But in a very brief summary, Linux Lite is going to be easier to install. It's going to give you a better, easier to use platform right out of the gate with minimal time commitment to be up and running and ready to go with not only a well-functional system with a lot of system tools, but it's also going to give us a well-themed system. It looks really nice and has a lot of options by default. Now, with that, Debian can be a little bit harder to install. It doesn't look as nice out of the box. We might have to take some extra steps. So why might one want to use Debian? The reason is because it gives you a more base system that allows you to completely customize every aspect and element of your system. That in and of itself is worth a boatload of information. So if you're wanting to use a system that in and of itself is going to be Going to be a little bit easier, minimal maintenance. You don't want to go into the terminal. You just want a good system. Linux Lite is going to be your go-to. If you do want the maximum control over your system, or you're ready to learn a little bit more about Linux, definitely move on over to Debian. It is an absolutely amazing, well-built system that is going to be rock solid. Let me go ahead and mention here that some people say that, the Debian packages are so old. Some of them are old, but this does not mean they are insecure. All right, we have been pushed so frequently in our culture to push security updates and push security updates and push security updates. We forget that some updates are security and some updates are feature. The reality is the powers that be often want to push features on us that we don't need, we haven't asked for, we don't necessarily want, and the introduction of them could interfere with our workflow. This is Debian's philosophy, is to keep things the same so that I'm never changing. I'm never having conflict with what's going on. That's really the purpose and the point of running Debian. It is an absolutely amazing system, and you're going to learn a lot about Linux by using a system like Debian. So those are kind of my thoughts and my choices. Which one's better? Again, like almost all of our distro wars, there's not a clear winner here. Linux Lite definitely for the new user to get something up and running quickly, to be set to go. For somebody who wants to learn it or wants a more custom system or wants a more stable system, Debian, rock solid. That's going to be the direction you want to go. So those are kind of my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts about these two distributions in the comments down below.